should definitely be revolutionary. We are living in a culture where the theory and language of addictions are presently controlled by secular categories. Words like disease, treatment, and even addiction convey the idea that these problems have their ultimate cause in the body rather than the soul, a commonly accepted view that is at odds with clear biblical teaching. Given the domination of this secular perspective, careful biblical inspection will most likely reveal many layers of error in our thinking about addictions that will take years and the insights of many people to uncover. Thinking biblically about these difficult problems will require much more than redefining words or making Jesus the higher power. Instead, everything must be open to biblical inspection. Since we live in a culture that assumes a sub-biblical position, we must realize that it affects us more than we think. For those who have been keeping track of cultural trends, what follows might not seem that radical. There are more and more probing and insightful voices, secular and Christian, that are questioning the legitimacy of current views on addiction. So this book is certainly not alone. I hope, however, that it can contribute wisdom and practical help to this very important area of debate and spiritual struggle. The woman, Folly, is loud. She is undisciplined and without knowledge. She sits at the door of her house, on a seat at the highest point of the city, calling out to those who pass by, who go straight on their way. "Let all who are simple come in here," she says to those who lack judgment. "Stolen water is sweet. Food eaten in secret is delicious." But little do they know that the dead are there, that her guests are in the depths of the grave. Proverbs chapter 9, verses 13 through 18. Part 1. Thinking Theologically. 1. Practical Theology. Jim had been sober for a year, an amazing feat for someone who had been drunk about half his 45 years. It seemed like a good time to meet for lunch so we could remember and celebrate. But when he walked into the diner, I could see that something was bothering him. "I am getting angry at God for giving me this problem with alcohol," he said as he slid into the booth. "Most people in the world don't have to struggle to stay away from the next drink every day of their lives. But I do. It's just not fair." He went on to say that he was losing interest in his church because it just wasn't speaking to his needs. He was finding his help and companionship in his daily AA meetings. I had known that my friend's thinking about his alcohol abuse was not always shaped by Scripture. Instead, it had been informed by an eclectic combination of AA, Scripture, and the chip he had carried on his shoulder for years. But why quibble about fine points of doctrine when the important thing was his sobriety? Scripture, however, says with good reason, "Watch your life and doctrine closely." 1 Timothy chapter 4, verse 16. At the moment Jim said that he was angry with God, I realized that doctrine, or theology, makes a difference. The only way he could have been angry with God was if he believed that his genetic constitution was more to blame for his history of lies and alcohol abuse than he was himself. Cravings, in particular, were assumed to be outside his control. Added to this was a theology that allowed him to think that spiritually he was a pretty good guy. As a result, God owed him. Why had he become less involved in his church? Is it possible that his eclectic theology defined him more as an alcoholic than as a Christian, and therefore his real family was the family of recovering alcoholics? Shouldn't Jim have realized that growing in godliness is not an overnight process? His theology must be telling him that the Christian life should be easy and change should be quick. The doctrine of progressive sanctification, however, cautions us that spiritual growth is going to emerge gradually, with some bumps and bruises along the way. What was odd about Jim's thinking was that he knew good biblical theology. He was a seminary graduate who was well educated in the Scriptures. He had studied some of the great church documents, creeds, and confessions of faith, and he agreed with them. In fact, he taught theology in his church. How then could he believe correct theology and at the same time not believe it? How could his everyday theology